Representative Chavez-DeRemer, thank you for appearing before the committee and for meeting with me and others over the past several weeks. The Committee on Labor has the responsibility to fairly enforce the nation's labor laws, unbiased towards one or the other. The Biden-Harris administration weaponized their authority against workers on behalf of Democrats' political supporters. They eroded the flexibility of over 27 million independent workers, threatening their ability to provide for their families in the manner in which they chose. They also attempted to dismantle the franchise model, employing over 9 million workers and empowering Americans from all communities to become successful business owners. The American people rejected these anti-worker policies at the ballot box. With President Trump back in office, we have the opportunity to turn the page and enact a pro-America agenda, empowering workers, securing economic prosperity. If confirmed as Secretary of Labor, I look forward to working together to accomplish this shared mission. Your nomination has support from both unions and businesses. You're in a unique position to build a bridge between these two groups to benefit all workers. With potential labor disputes on the horizon, I'm sure these relationships will be an asset to the Trump administration. There are concerns, however, about your past support for the Democrats' cornerstone legislation, the PRO Act. Workers should have the freedom to decide if they wish to join a union or not. The PRO Act would eliminate this freedom, allowing workers to be coerced and intimidated into unionization. I represent a right-to-work state. This protects workers from forced unionization. This is, of course, therefore, deeply important to me. I appreciated our conversations on this issue. I now understand that your co-sponsorship of the PRO Act did not reflect your support of the legislation, but rather your interest in being part of any group that legislated on behalf of employees' rights. I'm sure you will have the opportunity to explain your position and the Trump administration's position and agenda moving forward during this hearing. Thank you again for being here. I look forward to understanding your vision for the Department of Labor and how we can work together, empowering all workers and unleashing the American economy. With that, I yield to Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, for being with us. And let me begin by thanking the Biden administration for being the most pro-worker administration in the modern history of this country. The mission of the Department of Labor is, quote, to foster, promote, and develop the welfare of the wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the United States, improve working conditions, advance opportunities for profitable employment, and assure work-related benefits and rights, end quote. That is the mission of the Department of Labor, and it is a mission that is more important now, in my view, than it has ever been. Mr. Chairman, for the past 50 years, our economy has been doing extraordinarily well. Never, ever done better for the people on top. Top 1% right now is enjoying wealth and power in a way that has never existed in the history of America. We now have the absurd situation, the disgraceful situation, where three people, Mr. Musk, Mr. Zuckerberg, and Mr. Bezos, are now worth over $900 billion. That is more wealth than the bottom half of American society, 170 million people. Is that really what America is supposed to be about? In America today, Mr. Chairman, we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had. Over 60% of our people, as we speak right here, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. I grew up in a family living paycheck to paycheck. That ain't easy. Stress level, enormous. People trying to find out how they're going to get health care, how they're going to pay their rent, how they're going to feed their kids, which is one of the reasons why working class people die 6 years shorter lives, live 6 years shorter lives than the people on top. Given all of this reality of an economy that's working well for the billionaire class, but not for working families, we need a labor secretary who, in fact, is going to be a champion of working families, not be not be ambiguous about it, but stand up for the working families of our country. We need a labor secretary who understands that we must raise the minimum wage. Now, $7.25 federal minimum wage. Anybody think that anywhere in America can live on $7.25 an hour? We need a labor secretary who will work each and every day to make it easier, not harder, for workers to exercise their constitutional right to form a union and collectively bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. We need a labor secretary who understands that we must end once and for all the disastrous right to work laws in 28 states by repealing Section 14B of Taft-Hartley. We need a labor secretary who understands that we must end the international embarrassment of America being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave or paid sick days. Imagine that. Only major country on earth doesn't guarantee paid family medical leave. We need a labor secretary who understands that it's unacceptable that women are earning 75 cents on the dollar compared to men. So, Mrs. Chavez-DeRemer, I have reviewed your record, and in many respects, especially given the nature of the nominees that Mr. Trump has brought forth, it is very good. You were one of the few Republican members of Congress who co-sponsored the PRO Act and the Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act to make it easier for workers to form unions. You have been a defender of union apprenticeship programs, and you have fought to expand the concept of employee ownership, something that I feel very strongly about. Many unions, as the chairman mentioned, have come out in support of your nomination, and that is an interesting development. I have spoken with you, and I've spoken with union leaders who support your nomination. But here is my concern. If you are confirmed, you will not only be in charge of enforcing more than 180 labor laws that are on the books today, you will be the president's chief labor advisor. That's what you'll be. When it comes to labor policy, you will have to make a choice. Will you be a rubber stamp for the anti-worker agenda of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and other multi-billionaires who are blatantly anti-union? They don't make any bones about it. Or will you stand with working families all over the country? So that is really the main issue. It's not just your record. This is a very unusual administration. In my view, we are moving toward an authoritarian society where one person has enormous power. Will you have the courage to say, Mr. President, that's unconstitutional, that's wrong, I will not stand with you. So with that, I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and thanks for being with us.
And now to introduce the nominee, Senator Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I read the opening statement, I just want to point out the unique coalition that President Trump has built here. If you take Tulsi Gabbard or Bobby Kennedy and now Lori, you know, the last time Sean and I was in this room together, obviously we had our differences. And Bernie, I think you remember that well. But somehow we were able to put our differences beside because President Trump asked us to. And when the words come up, like Biden administration was the most pro-union labor person in 50 years, you got to remind yourself, he also lost the labor vote by 59% because it wasn't working. But President Trump brings something unique to the table as he's built a coalition, and Lori represents that. Lori represents someone that is uniquely positioned to bring people like Sean and I, who presented Lori to President Trump and said, this is someone that we can work together with. And I would hope that you would set your biased opinions to the side and understand that this is a negotiation between two fractions of the party that is saying we're willing to work together. Employees don't exist without employers, and companies don't exist without employees. And I recognize that as much as anybody. And there is a position where we can be at, that we can find a negotiated agreement where we can set some differences aside, like the PRO Act, I think my position on that has been very, very, very clear. Oklahoma is a right-to-work state, but unions also thrive there. And at the same time, we can find common ground. Lori represents that. And so regardless of what you might think about the president, I understand that this is someone that everybody should represent and should respect. If you're looking for a bipartisan, independent thinker that's going to represent the union that you want Mr. Sanders to say that you represent, when you understand that you have a president that's representing the Republican Party but also won the popular vote, you would think this is someone that you would be very happy with. Because she is directly, uniquely positioned in the center. And I truly say that from a position that I've had to move a long ways. And if I can move, and if Sean and I can move and come together on this, then that, if nothing else, should set some type of an example. Even though I do joke with my new friend over here, which I had the mic and he can't defend himself here, that if we were in a relationship, I'd be the man in the relationship. He adamantly denies that. But I say that because now we're friends enough that we can make fun of each other, and at the same time, we can work together. And so I want to read my statement, but what I've covered is pretty clear, and I wanted to say that from my heart. So, Chairman Cassidy, thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts and support on the nomination for Lori to be Secretary of Labor. As the Senate has gone through the advise and consent process of confirming President Trump's nominee, things have gotten increasingly partisan and contentious. But one thing that both sides of the aisle agree on is supporting working class Americans that power our country's economy. No company can survive without employees, and no employee is hired without a company. It takes both sides to be in a boat, rowing together in the same direction to be successful. I'm only moderately successful because I've been very fortunate to have employees that was willing to get in a boat with me and row in the same direction. With Lori's unique background as a small business owner, public servant, and through her relationship with union leaders, she has the ability to bridge the gap between businesses and workers. Lori's nomination reflects a historic coalition of working class Americans and elected President Trump to a second term in the White House. As a member of Congress, she often worked across the aisle in her efforts to support this cause. One of those issues is the PRO Act, as has been mentioned a couple times. I know that'll come up in conversation today. I get it, Oklahoma is a proud right-to-work state. And yet, we still support Lori. But as both sides of the table can continue to work together for hardworking Americans who have been struggling to put food on the table and to create better opportunities for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. I don't think we have to look any farther than understanding Lori is an independent, nonpartisan perspective who will always keep the workforce the top of mind. And I would really encourage all of you to take a hard look, just like my good friend Sean and I have done. So with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mullen. Representative Chavez-DeRemer, you have a statement, and I think you're going to, along the way, introduce your family.
Chairman Cassidy, Ranking Member Sanders, and members of the committee. It is an honor to appear before you as President Trump's nominee to lead the Department of Labor. My discussions with many of you have been insightful and inspiring, reinforcing my commitment to serve our nation's workforce. Under President Trump's bold leadership following his historic November victory, I am uniquely prepared to lead this department with resolve and purpose. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to honor the incredible people who have supported me throughout my 24-year journey in public service. My parents, who became ardent fans of C-SPAN when I entered Congress, are here today offering their unwavering support. My twin daughters, Emily and Annie, Emily was here last week, and I know with the postponement, but she couldn't come back. She's 36 weeks pregnant, lives in Michigan, and her doctor said no more flying. So, Emily, I know you're watching, and I know you support me here today. And Annie, one's a Democrat and one's a Republican, and they have been my steadfast defenders, teaching me patience and the value of an open mind. And finally, my loving husband, Sean, my high school sweetheart, who has stood by my side through every triumph and challenge. To all of you, thank you. Thank you for your boundless love and encouragement. I also want to thank the labor and business communities that are here in the audience today, because they support President Trump's vision for the American worker. I am deeply grateful to President Trump for this extraordinary opportunity to serve as the Secretary of Labor. It is both humbling and a call to action that I do not take lightly. In 2024, our nation witnessed the single greatest political achievement of our time. President Trump has united a new coalition of working-class Americans like never before. With 59.6% of Teamsters backing him, historic support from African American and Latino voters, and record-breaking turnout in once solid blue cities and states, Americans are speaking loud and clear. They are calling for action, progress, and leadership that puts the American worker first. Like many Americans, my journey is rooted in my values instilled by my father and mother. My father, a proud Teamster who worked tirelessly for over 30 years. The fair pay and benefits he received ensured our family's stability and security. From his example, I learned the transformative power of hard work and determination, propelling me to become the first in my family to graduate from college with a degree in business administration. Later, after supporting my husband through medical school, we built our own small business. For 2 decades, we successfully navigated the challenges faced by employers, from complex labor regulations to workforce shortages and rising costs. These experiences have given me invaluable insights into the struggles and triumphs of American business owners. Insights I carried with me as mayor of one of the fastest growing Oregon communities and later as a member of Congress. In every role, my priority has been clear: to fight for the American worker and the business that drive our economy. Our current economic landscape has changed dramatically since my father worked in a creamery, demanding bold action and real change. In the last 4 years, prices have risen, wages have fallen, and 78% of Americans do not feel confident that their children will lead better lives. We have also seen major companies like Hino Motors, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis have accelerated layoffs at facilities across the country. To rebuild confidence and strengthen our workforce, we must invest in educational pathways beyond the traditional 4-year degree, ensuring that every American worker has access to the skills and training for long-term success. Part of that effort requires honest discussion about our labor policies. I know there has been a lot of conversation about my support of the PRO Act. Like President Trump, I believe our labor laws need to be updated and modernized to reflect today's workforce and the business environment. As a member of Congress, the PRO Act was the bill to have those conversations. Conversations that matter deeply to the people of Oregon's 5th Congressional District. I recognize that that bill was imperfect, and I also recognize that I am no longer representing Oregon as a lawmaker. If confirmed, my job will be to implement President Trump's policy vision, and my guiding principle will be President Trump's guiding principle, ensuring a level playing field for businesses, unions, and most importantly, the American worker. I also know that we will not always agree, but I promise there will never be surprises. My door will always be open, and I will never put my thumb on the scale. That commitment extends to the work ahead of the Department of Labor, which stands at a crossroads with a vital role in shaping a strong and resilient economy. As we confront these challenges, I know that everyone in this room shares the same goal: an economy where every American has the opportunity to thrive through good wages, safe working conditions, and a secure retirement. My record of collaboration demonstrates a shared belief that under President Trump's leadership, we can deliver real solutions. Putting American workers first is not just a vision, but a promise to fight for every working mom, single dad, small business owner, and every American striving for their fair shot at the American dream. If I have the privilege of being confirmed, I look forward to working with each of you to solve the challenges facing our country. Together, we can shape our economy that uplifts every American. I thank you. I thank this committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. I'll begin. First question, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act, is a significant and controversial piece of legislation Democrats have championed for years. And it's not pro-worker, it's pro-big union. To my mind, being pro-worker means defending the right of all workers, including those who decide they don't want to join a union. Now, you co-sponsored the PRO Act as a member of Congress. Yes or no, do you still support the PRO Act?
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy. It was great to visit with you. I know how important this issue is to you, and as it was said today, I recognize that I'm no longer the lawmaker, and I do not believe that the Secretary of Labor should write the laws. It will be up to Congress to write those laws and to work together. What I believe is that the American worker deserves to be paid attention to. That was President Trump and I's conversation in supporting the American worker, how important that is. I will not be that lawmaker anymore, but I was working for Oregon's 5th Congressional District and representing that. I wanted to be at that table. I never want to be left out of a conversation where we can talk about the American worker and how important that is. And I respect the right of the right to work states, and I have said that the bill was imperfect. I understand that, and I'm no longer the lawmaker.
Okay. Now, the PRO Act, just to continue on that, would significantly impact franchisees and small businesses by increasing corporate control of the operations, or at least assuming that there's increased corporate control. This is yet another giveaway to large labor unions. It would make it easier to negotiate, the union to negotiate with large corporations instead of directly with the small business owner who actually employs the worker. So, question, do you believe federal law should prioritize policies that help small businesses thrive rather than imposing new regulatory hurdles which could hinder their success?
Senator, it's important for recognizing that the president's goal is to uplift all business owners and uplift all American workers. Understanding the franchise business model is important to the American workforce. I supported the overturning of the NLRB rule on joint employer to support the franchise business model and supported the president in this. And I align that this is important to grow this economy and recognize the flexibility in people choosing where they want to do business.
So by that, am I to take that you would commit to reexamining DOL's joint employer guidance to provide small businesses with a clear roadmap on the issue?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Certainly, if confirmed, I'll be looking at all regulations and determining and looking at all of these rules and regulations, and specifically that one.
And I think the small employer wants that clear roadmap.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Next question. Approximately 27 million workers work as independent contractors, including working moms, caregivers, self-employed business owners. Now, for many, the flexibility of independent work is essential to balancing personal responsibilities and earning a living for their family. I will point out that the PRO Act tried to impose a one-size-fits-all rule, which, as was done in California, disrupted livelihoods instead of helping workers. So question, if confirmed as Secretary, will you commit to refrain from implementing any rules stripping independent contractors of flexibility they need to provide for their families and to simultaneously contribute to the American economy?
Thank you, Senator. Certainly, we'll commit to understanding this. I know the president in the first administration set out that rule, and the parameters is very important to him on the flexibility of who is an independent contractor and who is an employee, and that they're properly classified. But I commit to working with you on supporting independent contractors through this process, because that flexibility is what needed. I understand, as you're mentioning in the PRO Act, but again, as I mentioned, that bill wasn't perfect, and these are those conversations that needed to be had, and supporting that independent contractor is key to growing this economy.
Now, supporting that independent contractor, and something I'm very interested in, is how do we provide the independent contractor with more affordable health and retirement benefits without losing that work flexibility? If you will, the employer, the person contracting with them, not an employer, would nonetheless be able to give them access to such benefits. I'm asking you if you will work with me and with our committee on legislation to make sure that the independent worker and the small business are able to get the affordable benefits available to ordinary employees at larger companies.
Yes, sir, I will commit to working with you wholeheartedly on this issue.
With that, I will yield to Chairman Sanders, the ranking member
That's
Sanders.
I'll take the chairmanship.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, thank you, Senator Cassidy. You're not the Congresswoman from Oregon anymore, right?
No, sir.
Okay. You're trying to become Secretary of Labor. Let me back up and say a word about what the PRO Act is. I'm not sure that most Americans know what it is. The reality is that in America today, labor unions have the support of some 70% of the American people. You know why? Because people understand that the big corporations and their bosses have all the power. People understand that CEOs make 300 times more than their workers. And people say, you know what, the only way we're going to get decent wages and benefits is when we organize. Millions of people want to join unions, but they can't join unions. You know why? Because corporations, day after day, operate in illegal ways. They break the law. They say to somebody, you were late 3 years ago. You're a pro-union, you were late 3 years, you're fired. We're going to take you into a captive audience, and for hour after hour, we're going to tell you how bad unions are. You want to join a union? Fine, you vote for a union, we're moving the plant to China. All of that stuff happens to be illegal. All of that stuff happens to be done every single day by corporate America. So, let me go back to the original question. PRO Act is designed to prevent illegal behavior on the part of corporate America, on the part of employers, so that workers can make a free choice. Do you support the PRO Act?
Thank you, Ranking Member Sanders, and I appreciate the conversation. I support the American worker. President Trump.
Okay, I don't mean to be rude.
No,
we
you're
don't
not
have a lot of time.
I
I'm
understand.
gathering that you no longer support the PRO Act, is what I hear. That you support the American worker. That's what everybody here will say. Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, in 2021, President Biden signed the Bush-Lewis Act that prevented the earned pension benefits of some 2 million union workers and retirees from being cut by up to 65%. There are people in Congress who want to undo that enormously important legislation. What do you feel about the Bush-Lewis Act?
I support the Bush-Lewis Act in protecting their retirements.
And you will go to the wall, to go to the mat supporting it?
I do support protecting people's retirements.
Federal minimum wage is $7.25. State after state has voted to raise the minimum wage. Somehow we can't do it here in Washington. 20 million workers are making less than $15 an hour. Do you support raising the minimum wage to a living wage?
Ranking Member Sanders, you know that that is an issue for Congress to determine and raising the minimum wage. As the Secretary of Labor, I cannot weigh in on that. That's determined by Congress. If they want to negotiate that, I will fully and fairly enforce the law as a Labor Secretary, if you all so choose, and give you whatever data possible to make that decision as members of Congress.
Well, I understand that Congress makes the law, but you have an opinion, and you will be the leading advocate for workers if you are confirmed. Question, if you were sitting where I'm sitting, would you vote to raise the minimum wage to a living wage?
Well, I'm not sitting where you're sitting hypothetically. I used to, but not any longer. But I do recognize that the minimum wage hasn't been raised since 2009, and the cost of living has gone up. But again, I cannot sit here and determine what that wage will be fully and fairly. I will enforce the law, but it will be up to Congress to determine, because that is not in the purview of the Secretary of Labor. For instance, in Oregon, I know that in Portland, Oregon, that the minimum wage is almost $16 an hour, and that might work for Portland, but that's not going to work for Grants Pass, Oregon. And I know that local communities, states determine what's best for their economy. What we don't want to do is shock the economy. But again, sitting here today, I cannot determine as Secretary of Labor
Okay,
if it should be.
Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, in his second week in office, President Trump fired Gwen Wilcox, a member of the National Labor Relations Board, leaving the NLRB without a quorum. And what that means right now, that if workers form a union, vote to form a union, and the company says, well, I think that was illegal, it's unfair, you can slow up the process because there's nobody to go to. Do you believe that the firing of Ms. Wilcox was illegal, which I do?
President Trump has a right to exercise his executive power, how he sees in consultation with.
Are you
with
concerned
his
that we do
team.
not have a functioning NLRB right now?
The NLRB is separate from the Department of
I
Labor, but
understand
I
that.
do believe that the function of the NLRB is important, and I will always take that into consideration doing my
Are you
job.
concerned that we do not have a functioning NLRB now?
Well, again, I have not been read in with President Trump, but he has a right to exercise his executive power, and I do believe the NLRB has an important role, independent of the Department of Labor, and I respect their position as an independent agency.
Thank you.
Senator Paul.
Welcome. I
Thank
enjoyed our
you.
meeting in our office, and I know you're aware of this, but about half the country has right-to-work laws. 26 states have them. When you compare right-to-work states with non-right-to-work states, you see that the right-to-work states have double the employment growth. If you look at manufacturing jobs, they have 5 times the manufacturing job growth. If you look at disposable income in the right-to-work states, about $3,000 more per individual for disposable income in the right-to-work states. The PRO Act wasn't just about organizing or enabling unions to organize, which they already have the right to do. The PRO Act was about overturning right-to-work laws in 26 states, half of the country. Most of these states would argue that this would be a horrendous invasion of their prerogatives. The chairman asked you, and then the ranking member asked you, do you still support the PRO Act? The reason we want to know is this is a tremendous sort of invasion of the states' rights to decide these. This would be overturning the right-to-work laws in half of the country. Do you still support the PRO Act, or don't you support the PRO Act?
Thank you, Senator Paul, and I appreciated our meeting as well. I thought it was quite, what you shared with me is how important it is to you and your state, and I heard that from many members. The right to work is a fundamental tenet of labor laws, where states have a right to choose if they want to be a right-to-work state, and that should be protected.
PRO Act would have overturned that.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I signed on to the PRO Act because I was representing Oregon's 5th District. But I also signed on to the PRO Act because I wanted to be at that table and have those conversations. But I fully, fairly, and support states who want to protect their right to work. I have said that to every senator that I have
So
visited
you
with.
no longer support the aspect of the PRO Act that would have overturned state right-to-work laws?
Yeah, there were so many parts.
That's a yes?
Yes, yes, sir.
No more questions.
Thank you, Senator.
With that, I go to Senator Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, welcome.
Thank you, Senator.
The Trump administration is flagrantly violating the bipartisan agreements in our appropriations law by refusing to spend money that Congress, in a bipartisan manner, has passed for the American people. I've been hearing about it in my home state of Washington. I heard from an organization in Edmonds about whether or not it'll now be able to provide support for our veterans who are seeking educational and employment opportunities as they transition to civilian life. I heard from a workforce training program that operates statewide about whether they'll now be able to continue to pair workers with employers in the grocery industry. You should know that the chaos surrounding these funding freezes is causing real damage to people's lives. So I want to know, will you commit to following appropriations laws and the Impoundment Control Act?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I know we talked about this in your office as ranking member of appropriations, and I do respect the Appropriations Committee. As a former member of Congress, I think everyone in this room who's ever sat behind that dais can understand that. Again, the President of the United States has the power to determine what he's going to do through his executive power. I am not been confirmed. I have not been read into all that.
I'm asking you, will you
Yes.
follow the law?
I will always follow the law and the
There is an Impoundment
Constitution.
Control Act. Will you follow that law?
I will follow the law and the Constitution.
If you receive a directive to violate appropriations laws and withhold funding for workers, what will you do?
I do not believe the president is going to ask me to break the law, 100%.
We have
not.
seen that across the board since he was put into office, where he is violating that law. So you will likely be asked, what will you do?
Well, it's a hypothetical. I have not talked to the president on this issue, and I
So
do
you
not
won't
believe.
commit to following the law if the president tells you to violate it?
I will commit to following the law, and I do not believe the president would ever ask me to break the law.
Well, okay. Last week, Elon Musk's Doge team came to the Department of Labor and got access to the department's sensitive information system. Musk's companies have, as you must know, been repeatedly accused of violating labor laws, including workplace safety laws, discrimination laws, and wage and hour laws. In fact, OSHA has investigated Tesla and SpaceX. Now Elon can access those investigations about his companies because he's gone in and gotten those records. He can also access sensitive market-moving data created by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That gives him tremendous power to manipulate quarterly jobs numbers and other important economic data, to say nothing of raising potential insider trading concerns. Just to make this abundantly clear, Elon Musk is now in a position to use his unelected role to use confidential government data to advance his own corporate interests while suppressing his competitors. Do you believe it is appropriate for someone with such blatant conflicts of interest to have access to those confidential economic and personal information?
Thank you, Senator Murray. If I have the honor of being confirmed by this committee and the full Senate, then I will have the opportunity. I have not stepped foot into the Department of Labor. And I understand.
Well, my question to you is, will you protect the private information of people whose records you will be overseeing? Will you allow anyone, a billionaire or anyone else, to come in and access that?
Again, because I have not been confirmed. I only see the reports that everybody else has seen. I have not been read into that. If confirmed, I will, if confirmed.
You're not answering the question.
If confirmed, I will support the Department of Labor. I think it's important to support the Department of Labor, but I have not been.
Will you support the private information that you will be overseeing? Will you protect that?
I would protect the private information. On this issue, I have not been privy to those conversations with the president. I have seen that, and if confirmed, I commit to you that I will always protect the Department of Labor and those issues.
Well, let me ask you about child labor. It's an area that I've been very worried about, the rise of child labor violations. The Wage and Hour Division at the department has actually seen a 31% increase in minors employed in violation of child labor laws since 2019. In the last administration, the Wage and Hour Division at DOL and the Solicitor's Office worked really hard to secure some really important victories against some really egregious violators. How will you make sure that the Wage and Hour Division and the Solicitor's Office work together to enforce our child labor laws in this country?
Well, protecting child labor is abhorrent, and nobody should stand for child labor exploitation. I will do everything in my power within the Department of Labor to double down on the safety of all American workers that are exploited, but especially child labor. And I would love to work with your office. If this is an important issue, it should be important to everybody to making sure that we protect against any child labor exploitation.
Senator Husted.
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy. And it was a pleasure to visit with you, Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, in our meeting yesterday. I appreciate you taking the time to come visit and share your views across a variety of issues. I would like to talk a little bit today. I know that everyone in this hearing has talked about how they care about the American worker and how we make the world better for them. one of the ways we do that is we do more Made in America, which I know is very important to President Trump. Another way that we can consider this in terms of earning power of the American worker is the impact that illegal immigration has had on undermining their ability to earn higher wages. And I'm just interested in your opinion about whether or not that you think the influx of millions of people into this country who many of them are here illegally is undermining the earning power of the American worker.
Well, certainly we want to protect the American worker, and Made in America is important to the President of the United States. I couldn't be more proud to support the America First agenda for exactly that reason. We certainly want to make sure that we're focused on growing this economy. That is the conversation that I had with the President on how can we bring the American worker to be the pinnacle of every conversation that we have and supporting them and growing this economy. So yes, the influx of the mass immigration that we've seen over the last 4 years has hurt the American worker, and we want to make sure that we're supporting President Trump in his endeavor to support the American worker at all costs.
Great, thank you. Let's talk about another aspect of Made in America. If we're going to make more things in America and we're going to compete on price so that we don't have inflation, we're obviously going to need to create more productivity. Productivity comes from technology in the workplace. As we integrate technology in the workplace throughout time, it has always been a subject of conversation, consternation, but it is inevitable that technology will advance and we will have to compete. I would like for you to talk about your thoughts on the role of technology in the workplace, because we want to make jobs safer. We want to make them more rewarding, which technology can do. We also know that in creating productivity, it can create profits for business, and we want to make sure that the reward of that innovation is given to both the worker and the business in terms of who benefits from the introduction of that technology. Talk about the role of technology in the workplace as it relates to labor and how we do more Made in America with these new innovations.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. We had this conversation yesterday, and how important that you've been involved from all levels representing your states. And I've talked to many of the senators on this issue, and it is a consternation about, will that replace, the American worker? And I would say there's got to be space for both, because it's going to happen. And what we don't want is for other countries to get ahead of the game, ahead of America. So how we can work together with the American workforce, the employers and the employees, and how we can work with Congress to determine what that looks like. But if there is profitability in there and we can support the American worker, and then we can have those American workers upskilled and reskilled, and this is going to be great for America to grow that economy and then share in that profit with the employees that are supporting. I think that's the key. The President and I had a conversation specifically on building that bridge between the employer and the employee and labor and business, all of that. And if we grow this economy, we can do to bigger and better things, and everybody can live that American dream, as you mentioned. So I look forward to really diving in as the Department of Labor and giving the resources, not only to those businesses, but not only to those employees, but to members of Congress who can take this story back to their states and know that the Department of Labor, and as me as a leader, is going to work on their behalf.
And a final component of that is that many, many Americans can have higher paying jobs if they have the right kind of skills. They don't need to go to college. They can get there through apprenticeships. Talk about how we can expand apprenticeships and make sure that we're helping the American workforce get the skills they need to compete, be more productive, and help America win.
And one of President Trump's #1 focus is the expanded apprenticeships, is the investment in apprenticeships, making sure that we have the skilled workforce. I know as a former mayor and working with business owners and working with community colleges that not everybody's going to get that 4-year degree. We have to pay attention that they have the skills that they need, that they can connect right to the business owners in their communities and reinforce that and not have to pick up and walk away. There's nothing that I want more than for business and employers and the education departments to work together and really have a skilled workforce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Senator.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, when we met, you expressed your strong support for registered apprenticeships. So I want to dig a little bit deeper on that last question you were asked. That was reassuring to hear, particularly in light of the first Trump administration's effort to fund non-registered apprenticeships, or IRAPs, as they're called. You also said that you had not yet had an opportunity to talk with the president about policy at the time we met. Have you had the opportunity to talk with the president about about registered apprenticeships? And if so, has that changed your position?
No, thank you, Senator, on that issue. It is so important on the registered apprenticeships and really investing and even doubling down on that. I know in the first administration, and I haven't talked to the president on the first administration's policies compared to now on apprenticeship from the last administration, but I think there's a lot to learn from what happened in the first administration and the successes and not successes. But right now, we're focused on the registered apprenticeships, growing those, investing in those, and making sure that those are adhered to.
Thank you. I want to also dig a little bit deeper on appropriated funds. The Labor, Health and Human Services Appropriations Bill includes dedicated funding for apprenticeship programs and specifies that the funding is only available for registered apprenticeships. So I ask this in the context of actions this administration has already taken, including a government-wide funding freeze that has now been halted by the court. As ranking member of the Labor, Health and Human Services Appropriations Subcommittee, I have a particular interest in the department implementing our bill as Congress intends. That is why I was so alarmed to see the National Institutes of Health flaunt the law last week when it proposed a policy that directly conflicts with longstanding appropriations language in the Labor HHS bill. The Labor HHS bill says that you can't do it, and NIH said it was doing it anyways. My question to you is, will you follow the law that says funding for apprenticeship programs can only be used for registered apprenticeships, yes or no?
Yes.
More broadly, do you commit to spending funding as Congress appropriates it?
Yeah, again, as I mentioned earlier, it was asked, as a former member of Congress, I highly respect the appropriations process and the role of Congress.
Thank you.
Yes.
The nation's nurses face challenging working conditions, and they are too frequently exacerbated by instances of workplace violence. We talked about that in my office. I appreciated that you said that you really take that issue seriously. Right now, the Department of Labor plans to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking in June of this year for the workplace violence in healthcare rulemaking. Do you commit to getting this proposed rule issued by June of this year and finalized in a very timely way?
Well, I can commit to working with you on the issue because it is an important one. And if confirmed, I will look at every rule as it moves forward. But until then, I haven't even seen specifically on the rule. But I commit to working with you and taking a look at it.
Close conversation on that.
Yes.
We've been waiting a long time. It's past due. Your opening statement mentioned putting workers first. You've repeated that a number of times. So I hope to have your commitment to aggressively pursue enforcement against employers that deny workers the wages they've earned or fail to provide safe working conditions. The Department of Labor plays a critical role in protecting workers' rights, including ensuring workers get the back pay they are owed and investigations into allegations of child labor law violations. If confirmed, I look forward to working with you to make sure that the department has the resources to do this important work. Can you commit to me that this important work will continue under the Department of Labor, at the Department of Labor under your leadership, yes or no?
Yes.
Can you confirm that information under the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division on their website will remain up to date, publicly accessible, and comprehensive like it is today? Yes or no?
Again, I have not been at the Department of Labor. I have not, but I look forward to working with the agency heads and making sure that people have the information that they need.
All right, one last question. The Women in Apprenticeship and Non-Traditional Occupations Grant Program.
Senator Baldwin, time's expired.
All right, I will submit that for.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, we served together in the House and worked together on the House Education and Workforce Committee, where you were a leader. You worked on many of the very issues that you are testifying about today. You are enormously qualified for this position, and I'm proud to support you. But can you explain to us for a moment what it means to you to put American workers first in this golden age of America's economy?
Thank you, Senator. Well, it's important to me, as was mentioned, the American worker. But we have to make sure that the American worker is being fortified with not only the skills that they need in order to answer the call, but people are looking for the American dream. People are wanting to have the skills to work in whatever they determine that to be. Again, we're seeing it's not the four-year university always, it's the two-year, it's the certificate base, it's answering the call so they can have mortgage-paying jobs for their families and understand that we're going to protect their benefits and their rights and safety in the workplace. The Department of Labor is sole focus is to make sure that we are protecting the wage earner, that we are helping the job seekers who are out there looking and really reinvigorating the job seekers who have decided that they don't want to look any further, and then protecting those retirees. As member of Education and Workforce and working together. Workforce investment, workforce development, I think is going to be key for all of our respective states. This shouldn't be a party issue. I've said this over and over again. That's why I've always worked across the aisle, because the American worker, we don't know what their party is, but we know that it matters to them to protect their families. I know how important my family's jobs were for us growing up, and I know how important it was for my husband and I to build that business for our children and soon-to-be grandchild. So I look forward to continuing down that road and always keeping that American worker at the pinnacle. And President Trump has said the same thing, and we align on this issue. The American worker, this new coalition, this new direction is where we're headed in this country.
Very, very well put. I know you know this. Indiana is the top manufacturing state in the country, yet the China shock wiped out 5 million manufacturing jobs in this country, and yet the federal government programs that were built to help those people who lost their jobs, way too many of them were left behind and didn't get a job as good as the manufacturing job that they had before because of the efforts of China to wipe out so many of those jobs in our country. How can we better serve those people? How do we get those people back on their feet and help them find meaningful, good-paying jobs like the one that they had before that was taken away by our biggest enemy, China?
That's right. Well, again, it's that workforce investment, that workforce development. Oftentimes, as a former mayor, if we don't go out and talk to the business community, if we don't go out and talk to those employers about what they're seeking and how they can find those jobs, we have to make sure that we are the leaders in this nation and in the world, not China and not any other country. President Trump, the golden age that you mentioned, this has been first and foremost the America First agenda and workforce development and protecting the American worker and have them the ability to earn those wages and live the American dream is number one in the America First agenda. That to me is telling why this coalition, this new direction of bringing labor and business and support is to uplift all Americans. And this is first and foremost on the president's mind.
Back in November, when President Biden was still in office, his Labor Department reported a 31% increase over the last 5 years of illegal child labor in America, a direct result of open borders. And I wonder, have you thought about what the Labor Department or President Trump and your leadership can do to save those kids who are in our country being illegally exploited for work in America?
Well, I have not had a conversation specific to that topic, but I know how important it is to protect well, first of all, children who have no fault of their own are being exploited. We never want to exploit our children. Again, as I mentioned, it's abhorrent that we would ever in this country choose to do so. So we will make sure that our workers are safe, we will make sure that our children are safe, and that we will make sure that we are heading in the right direction to protect our businesses and protect our workers and never exploit our children. And we'll double down at the Department of Labor if there's any bad actors doing so.
The Labor Department is responsible for combating human trafficking
That's
and
right.
forced labor under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And the Biden administration completely ignored these kids that came into that were brought here illegally and being exploited. And I know that's something that you'll take very seriously and work on. I look forward to working with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator.
I yield back.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your willingness to serve and coming before this committee. I think Senator Murray's questions were really important regarding the security of data and sensitive information at the Department of Labor. And so I just want to drill down and maybe make a finer point here. Elon Musk is right now the subject of several OSHA investigations. Multiple companies are subject of multiple investigations. His rocket company has an injury rate that's about 9 times higher than the industry average. I heard you say that you're going to protect data privacy, but let me just ask once again the very specific question. Will you commit to denying access to Elon Musk or any of his representatives to information about labor violations at OSHA or any other information about labor violation investigations at the Department of Labor?
Thank you, Senator. On this same issue, committing to the privacy. Again, I know that for most listening to this, it seems as though when we're trying to answer these questions, but I have not been in these conversations, as I'm not confirmed. I only see what has happened possibly on the news and so forth. The president has the executive power to have his coalition of advisors and determine what's best for the American people. He made a promise to the American people that he was going to do these things and check into what is happening. Other than that, I have not been read in on any of this. And if confirmed, I commit to taking a deeper look and working with your office and any other office on this issue. But at this point, again,
This one feels pretty simple, right? I mean, this is an individual who owns companies that have existing investigations. He has a direct interest in getting information about the seriousness of those investigations. He has interest in getting information about investigations against his competitors. It seems like a pretty simple commitment to make to say, I am not going to give any private company exclusive access to information about open investigations against them or their competitors. I mean, why can't you just make that commitment to us?
well, again, the president has the executive power to exercise it as he sees fit. I am not the president of the United States. I work for the president of the United States if confirmed, and I will serve at the pleasure of the president on this issue. Again, I have not been into the Department of Labor, and so I will commit to working with your office. I'll commit to coming back as soon as if confirmed, and I'm in the Department of Labor, coming back and answering those questions to this committee wholeheartedly. I will commit to that.
You have the ability to disagree with the president. You certainly serve at his pleasure, but that doesn't mean that you have to take actions that you believe to be unethical. If the president asks you to give access to information to benefit a friend of his who has pending investigations, you wouldn't say no?
Well, the president, I think in building his team, a formidable team, to determine that, I don't think is expecting yes men and women. We are going to be advisors to the president, and I would talk to the president. But on this issue, I'm not an attorney. I would certainly consult with the Department of Labor solicitors. I would certainly consult with the White House and their attorneys. But until I am confirmed and in the Department of Labor, I would not be able to say specific to this without having the full picture before that.
I don't think you need to be an attorney to understand that giving access to a company to sensitive data about labor violations at their company or to competitors' companies is deeply unethical. Let me ask you another question. Both SpaceX and Amazon have filed suits against the NLRB contesting its constitutionality. It's a pretty extreme argument saying that the NLRB is actually unconstitutional. I know you were asked earlier about the firing of one of the members. Do you believe that the NLRB is constitutional?
I believe the NLRB definitely has its authority, and I respect that authority. I know you mentioned, or I mentioned, that I'm not an attorney. That being said, it looks like the courts are dealing with that. But what I respect is the fact that it is separate, independent agency, and I think it has a role to play, and I respect that. And as the Department of Labor Secretary have confirmed, I will take that very seriously.
But do you believe that it's constitutional?
Yeah, I believe that
You can answer that question real fast.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely believe that the NLRB is an important agency, independent. And I will work with the NLRB as we, have very different jurisdictions, but we often overlap. And so I think it's important to recognize that it is an important agency, independent, and so forth.
Senator Moody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy. Hello, congratulations on your nomination. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to follow up on something my colleague, Senator Banks, brought up, and you mentioned that you had not had a conversation about this, but I'm hopeful that you have paid attention to what's been going on and studied what's been happening to so many children throughout our nation, especially over the last 4 years. It is common knowledge now, it is not a political opinion, that under the Biden administration, hundreds of thousands of minor children flooded into our country. Many were forced into labor trafficking, working many hours a day, even undercutting American wages, but to the detriment of many of these children. Some were injured, some died. It was heartbreaking. As a mother of a child that is around the same age that some of these children were forced into this labor, I find it appalling that more people were not speaking out about this, and certainly unacceptable that we had an administration that was not talking about this every single day when these horrors were taking place in our own country. Florida was so upset about it, we kept asking routinely for more information from the administration so that we could monitor what children were in our state and care for them and account for them. We even launched a grand jury investigation. I just wanted to quote for you what that grand jury found. And again, this is community members, not politically driven. The Biden administration forced migration, sale, and abuse of foreign children. This process exposed children to horrifying health conditions, constant criminal threat, labor and sex trafficking, robbery, rape, and other experiences not done justice by mere words. And the challenging part here is, as we've uncovered more and more instances of this, it appeared that the Department of Labor was not engaging and expecting the same type of transparency that many of the states were, even though the Department of Labor had the responsibility and authority to enforce some of this stuff. And when we tried to get Biden administration representatives to come and testify and give us information and provide documents, we were repeatedly obstructed from doing that. And in fact, they responded to one of our requests that they show up by saying the state had failed to show how it was in the interest of the agency, when all we were seeking to do was to fight in the interests of the tens of thousands of lost children. And so I will ask you, if you are given this enormous responsibility, do you commit to doing everything in your power to enforcing the child labor laws and working with the states that so desperately want to protect the children in their states, that believe they have the responsibility and the ability to do that?
100%, Senator. As I mentioned, what has happened over the last 4 years has been horrendous. It is not something that the United States should stand for. And again, it is not a political issue. This is protecting children, and we should not ever allow that to happen in this country. And I 100% commit to you that I will work with you, your office, and any other office in order to protect those children and understand that we should never accept this in the United States.
There was some words recently promoted in a memo by President Trump and his administration, radical transparency. And I think that is essential in moving forward from these agencies so that the people understand what is taking place in their country under their noses, because we know any power that rests in this government rest with the consent of the governed. And I think as we are waking up to what has been happening, many are saying we never gave that consent. And we as a Congress need to hold the agencies accountable to that. I want to now direct your attention to right-to-work laws in states that have chosen to pass right-to-work laws, like the state of Florida. We passed legislation to ensure that, for example, dues could not be forced out of people's paychecks. That was very important within our state. And when the Department of Labor saw that under the last administration, they sought to threat to withhold funding from the state of Florida when we promoted our own policies to ensure reasonable collective bargaining and right-to-work laws. We brought suit. I fought that in court. That is still pending. It is on appeal right now. Do I have your word that you will look at that, dig in on that, determine if those threats were indeed justified, and if not, work with the state of Florida to resolve that?
Yes. While it is in litigation, I can't comment on the actual litigation. I do look forward, if confirmed, to working with your office and taking a hard look at that and respecting what the state of Florida is doing with their right-to-work laws.
And put simply, do you respect the ability of the states to enact policy in the benefit of our own states?
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you to Representative Chavez-DeRemer for the good discussion we had about a month ago. You said you respect the National Labor Relations Board and want to work together with it, though they are independent. The National Labor Relations Board was created by statute, and it's the law of the land, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was created pursuant to the National Labor Relations Act, which was also a statute and is the law of the land, correct?
Yes, sir.
Currently, the NLRB lacks a quorum because of actions of President Trump. The legality of his removal of an NLRB member is being contested in court, but the NLRB should have a quorum, shouldn't it?
Well, in order to do business, I suppose, yes.
No,
They have to have
but
a
so
quorum.
that your opinion is a president of either party or a Congress of either party should assure that the National Labor Relations Board has a quorum, correct?
Yes.
Because in the absence of a quorum, it can't do its job, correct?
That would be on its face, yes.
The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, do you believe in the notion that workers should have equal opportunities?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Do you believe in the notion that workers should have equal employment opportunities?
Absolutely.
The EEOC is an independent agency, but it deals with workers, and you said you want to put workers first. The EEOC right now lacks a quorum. The EEOC was created by statute, and it's the law of the land, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever taken the position as a congresswoman that either the NLRB or the EEOC should be defunded or eliminated?
No, not that I recall.
So since the EEOC is the law of the land and it's important that workers have equal employment opportunities, the EEOC should have a quorum to operate, correct?
Yes.
Because of actions of the president, the EEOC currently has no quorum and cannot operate to protect equal employment opportunities. But you would agree with me, similar to the discussion we had about the NLRB, that it being the law of the land, any president of either party and any Congress of either party should ensure that the EEOC has a quorum so it can protect workers, correct?
Yes.
The Department of Labor has some specific programs designed to benefit veterans. There's a couple of programs within the DOL focused on veterans' employment needs. Should you be confirmed, would you take those obligations to watch out for American veterans seriously?
Absolutely.
If you became aware that an employer, a major employer, was taking actions that disproportionately negatively affected veterans, would that concern you?
Yes.
The mass firing that President Trump is doing within the federal government right now is hitting veterans very, very hard. The civilian workforce is about 3% veteran. The federal workforce is 30% veteran. And veteran workers are also disproportionately probationary employees. The actions thus far taken by this administration are punishing American veterans badly. I live in one of the states that has the highest per capita representation of veterans. We're seeing people laid off at VA clinics. I have 2 VA clinics that are supposed to open in the next couple of months whose opening is jeopardized because of the mass firings. and even outside of the VA, the disproportionate effect of the firings to this point fall hard upon veterans. I'm happy to hear that you will take it seriously if any major employer in this country disproportionately punishes veterans. Do you know what a restrictive covenant is?
I do not.
A restrictive covenant is when an employer, as a condition of employment, makes an employee say, and if you leave, you can't work with anybody in the same industry. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept. People
Yes.
use different titles, but you're familiar with the
Yes.
concept. Do you think restrictive covenants limiting a worker's ability to choose where they want to work is anti-worker?
Well, I'm assuming you're probably also naming those as the non-competes?
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Actually,
and-
non-compete is the better, yes, you're
Yeah,
right.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
when I didn't recognize the other term.
Both are used, but non-compete's probably more common.
Yeah, so, and I know that that's primarily taken up by most of the state jurisdictions on whether that's their law or not their law, and that determined by that. So I think it's dependent on what the state's laws are and how they focus and
But
implement those.
if you want to put workers first, restricting their ability to find a job after they leave one employer, that's not putting workers first. It restrains workers. The reason I ask is that in the absence of quorum at the NLRB General Counsel has just issued a memo rescinding a previous order of the Biden administration protecting workers. Put workers first.
Thank you, Senator.
I yield.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Collins.
Thank you. Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, a major provision of the PRO Act, which you co-sponsored, would eliminate secret elections when workers vote on whether or not to organize. The secret ballot obviously helps to protect workers from intimidation, pressure, and retaliation. Do you continue to support the elimination of secret ballots in union elections?
I do not support that portion. That's an important, supporting the secret ballot is key, not only to protect the employee from maybe a bad union, but also a bad worker. So I think it's good to have that democracy in keeping those ballots protected, the secret ballot.
Let me turn to a different issue. In the last administration, OSHA published a proposed rule that would affect our firefighters and our fire departments. I've heard directly from many volunteer and rural firefighters from the state of Maine who have concerns about the high compliance costs and what they view as totally impractical training requirements that this rule would impose. Some of the larger departments could accommodate these changes, but the majority of the fire departments in Maine are not large. They're serving small rural communities. OSHA itself has estimated that the nationwide compliance costs could exceed $100 million per year for volunteer fire departments alone. And so the result is going to be closed departments, a reduced firefighter workforce, and harming public safety in small rural communities. Although there may be some benefits to take a look at the old standards and see if they are updated, what OSHA has published would be extremely harmful and actually decrease public safety in rural America. What is your position on this rule, and will you re-examine it if confirmed?
Yes, Senator Collins, I will look to re-examine. I would imagine all rules and regulations confirmed once I can get in those doors and fully understand. But protecting our first responders, we've seen it in a small community like Happy Valley, Oregon, and beyond. To protecting our firefighters and making sure they have the resources they need and helping them, of course, comply. But sometimes understanding what that compliance looks like, I think, is a remit of the Department of Labor for all rules and regulations. People want to comply, but the cost that they would close their doors is not going to be good for any community. And I promise you, if confirmed, that I will take a hard look at that regulation and work with your office as well.
Thank you. Last year, the state of Maine had 15 million tourists. That is about 10 times our state's total population. So it's not surprising that those who are in the hospitality industry, despite every effort, cannot come up with a sufficient number of employees to serve the flood of tourists, which we are very happy to welcome to the great state of Maine. So we rely heavily on seasonal worker visas, known as H-2B visas, to help fill that workforce gap. Can you commit to making available the maximum amount of H-2B visas that Congress authorizes? There's some discretion on what the number will be, but Congress gives the administration the authority to go to the maximum level.
That's right, Senator. I commit to working not only with you all, and this is brought up by many of you in our meetings on how important the H-2A, H-2B, H-1B visas are and the seasonal visas. I will work with the Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Noem, in looking at those caps. And the Department of Labor's role and remit on this is testing the market and understanding who's asking for these permits, and then working with the Department of Homeland and the Department of State to talk about that cap and whether or not Congress wants to enact that. So yes, I commit to working with you and them as well.
Thank you.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning still, Congresswoman. It's good to see you, and I appreciated the time we had when we met in my office a little bit ago. I appreciate your willingness to serve and that of your family. I wanted to follow up before turning to a couple of questions I have on a line of questioning we heard from Senator Murray. I take it from her questions and your answers that you have stated that if you are directed by the president to take an action that would break the law, you would follow the law.
Absolutely. We'll follow the law and the Constitution. I do not believe the president would ask me to break the law.
I understand that as the pat response from nominees. We've seen a lot of evidence that he will in the last 4 weeks. And then I wanted to follow up on Senator Murphy's point about Mr. Musk's access to DOL information. And this is not a question, but I just want you to understand why we are focused on this. Mr. Musk spent $250 million to get Donald Trump elected. And since Inauguration Day, we have found out that the State Department was planning to give Tesla a $400 million contract for armored vehicles. Now we find that Elon Musk has access to the Department of Transportation records and data systems when, in fact, he's being investigated by DOT because of multiple inquiries into the safety of Tesla vehicles and the deaths they may have caused. Then we find out that he's got access to the Department of Labor information. He's got programmers with him when we know that he's being investigated by the Department of Labor. So it seems like Mr. Musk is getting a big payback from Mr. Trump right in the first month of this administration, and that concerns us greatly. Now, I did want to turn to a couple of issues that you and I talked about. We have a shared interest in increasing access to apprenticeship and workforce training, and there's been real bipartisan focus on that. If confirmed, will you expand these programs, and how will you prioritize rural communities in this effort? Because getting apprenticeship programs in rural communities to fit the actual economy and workforce needs in those rural communities is a pretty unique thing, and I'd just like your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you, Senator, and I enjoyed our conversation as well. Again, a lot of this information that and experience comes from being a former mayor.
Yeah.
And then having the experience as a member of Congress as well to understand how the laws are made. But in the rural areas, oftentimes forgotten. It's a forgotten parts of a lot of our states. One of the things we talked about is the hubs, and I think I talked about that with Senator Hickenlooper as well. And knowing that there are programs that are going to skill the workforce in those rural communities. For instance, an example in Oregon, one of the hubs I think I mentioned to you and Senator Hickenlooper was, it's a real direct, while it's not an apprenticeship program, until we can fortify or work toward possibly what that looks like in other parts of certain industries. We talked, I think, about the healthcare industry specifically, is working with our community colleges and our local technical colleges to have those certificate based so that we have that workforce right in those communities. And when we take that information from our businesses and we kind of back into degrees for our students in order to do that. But I look forward to working on a bipartisan level to really fortify those apprenticeship programs so that we can have that skilled workforce.
Well, I would look forward to working in a bipartisan way on that. One of the things we could do is to pass the bipartisan bicameral reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that we agreed to last Congress. So that's an important way we could move forward. With 2.6 million workplace injuries and illnesses reported annually, we have to do more to protect the health and safety of our workers. Yet workers still have to fight for common sense protections like air conditioning for delivery drivers during the scorching heat of the summer and properly fitting protective equipment for construction workers. If confirmed, how will you coordinate and prioritize workforce safety across all of DOL's agencies?
Oh, thank you, Senator. One of, again, the remits for the Department of Labor is to protect the workplace, make sure that they're free of hazard, make sure that we're protecting the American worker. Nobody expects to go to work in the morning and be unsafe or be hurt. So it will be the role to work with the experts in all of the departments across the Department of Labor to make sure that we're honoring the mission of the Department of Labor.
And I would appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that you rightly respected the expertise of some of our federal workforce there because they know a lot about workplace safety, and I don't want them to be subject to these mass layoffs we're seeing. I will submit for the record a question about paid leave. We were able to expand it for federal workers under President Trump's first term. I'd appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. And Senator Mullen, I apologize if you snuck in just before Senator Collins last time, but Senator Mullen.
Give me time to get my head in place. Thank you, Chairman. And I just kind of want to point out some interesting things that's going on. The senator from New Hampshire was complaining about a contract that was awarded by the Biden administration, and somehow you're tying it to the Trump administration for Tesla. I don't actually know how those work. I mean, you know as good as I do, that was a contract that was given by the Biden administration, or that was looking to be given by the administration, not the Trump administration, and somehow that's a conflict of interest. And then when we start talking about that, you're concerned about Mark and Jeff and Elon, it wasn't too long ago, you guys were happy to take all their money. It's just the party that's supposed to be of inclusion. Now all of a sudden, if you don't agree with this, you're the enemy. And I'll use my friend Sean, for example. He was brave enough to speak and spoke his mind on some things that maybe all of us didn't agree at the Republican convention. And for the first time in decades, he was not invited to speak at the Democrat National Convention. Why? Because he had a different opinion about where the Democrat woke movement has went. What happened to the conclusion? Yet what we do is we spend all of our time complaining and making reckless accusations about something that's absolutely false. And when you guys don't want to hear it, you guys just accuse everybody else of being a criminal and for some reason being compromised. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's the same thing we heard in 2017, and yet you guys are just recycling. You guys are doing nothing but trying to stir up your base by fear when it's absolutely 100% wrong and shouldn't even exist. Now, with my rant over, I'd like to turn back to Lori and ask you a question. You know, you're very uniquely positioned. I made that clear when I was introducing you. Coming from a coming from a very blue state and being a Republican, that's very heavily union, and you've been backed by the union. You have the support of a new coalition that President Trump has brought together.
That's right.
What role do you think you play in this new coalition?
Thank you, Senator Mullen. For one, thank you again for being here today and introducing me. But on this question, building the bridge, and I think that this is the new direction. 77,300,000 Americans voted for President Trump. We know that the American worker, wherever they are on the continuum, if it's organized labor, if it's employees, if it's employers, they supported and gave the president a mandate. He won 312 electoral votes. He won all the swing states, and he did have a mandate. But in that mandate, what's unique about this time is the fact that he included the American worker of being first. He's not talking about, he's talking about the men and women who build this country. That's the focus. And I believe that the president nominated me to bring my experience, not only as a mayor, not as a business owner, but because I did garner labor support. The president and I align in this issue, that if we focus on the American worker, despite the politics that is going to come up sometimes, we're not going to agree on everything, but we can agree that we are at a pivotal moment in this history to capitalize and support the American worker, and that everyone can achieve the American dream. I know how important that was for my family. I know how important that is to all your constituents, and I want to bring people to the table. And when they're at that table, I want them to stay at that table, because I know it sometimes they're going to disagree. But it is not to put the thumb on the scale. It is not to weigh in support on each side. It's to keep them at that table till they determine that they can solve the issues, just like you and Sean O'Brien. This is important to the president. It's important to me. He asked me to be an extension on his team, a formidable team, where we won't forget that. And I won't forget that. I'll work hard every day to be the leader that this country deserves at the Department of Labor to carry on that message for the president.
One of President Trump's main focus was bringing jobs back through manufacturing. In fact, the American First agenda was all about protecting the American workers. How do you plan on working uniquely with both sides to bring manufacturing back to the United States?
Well, again, thank you for this question, because it is where we have been lacking. We have seen communities be decimated, small rural communities where, Oregon is a timber industry, and they have been decimated over the last 15, 20 years. We have to bring those back so we can build up our communities. I look forward to investing in the workforce. Again, it was mentioned WEO, which is a bipartisan effort, and as a member of Ed and Workforce, I was proud to honor that. And if President Trump wants to bring that forward, I look to working with all of your offices for that workforce investments to build up those jobs, to reinvest in those manufacturing jobs.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you,
yield back.
Senator.
Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Congresswoman, for coming on out and talking to us. In your opening statement, your written testimony, you talked about putting American workers first as the priority here, and I appreciate that. I think a lot of us agree with that. I guess I just want to ask you, because you talked about the vision that you have for that should be a vision for our country. So I guess I wanted to ask you to sort of expand on that vision. Is $7.25 an hour, is that enough to live on in America in the year 2025?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I know Ranking Member Sanders asked the same question. I recognize that it hasn't been changed, the minimum wage.
I guess I'm just asking you, do you think that's enough for a worker to live on? I'm just trying to get a sense of your vision for what the standard of life for an American worker is.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, for every state, for every community, again, I mentioned Oregon. What happens in Portland doesn't happen in Grants Pass. It certainly doesn't happen over in
I understand that about
Eastern
Oregon, but I guess I would ask you, what is $7.25 an hour? That is what in an annual term? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh.
It's not a math question.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of it. So it's about $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
So I guess I just want to ask you, do you think that there is a state in this country where someone can live comfortably on their own for $15,000 a year?
Well, I don't know if there is, but I would look and work with Congress. This is a congressional issue. I hope I can support you in telling the story of what's happening on the ground.
But
so
that's
that you
what
can
I'm just trying to
determine-
get a sense of from you is is what your vision is, because I do want to try to engage and see if we can work on that together. So for instance, biggest issue I keep hearing about is about affordability of housing and the challenges that people are facing when it comes to that. So again, I'm just trying to get a sense of where you're at on this. Like, do you have a sense of what percentage of someone's salary should go towards housing? Is there an upper limit in your mind of where you'd like to see that?
Well, I know oftentimes they talk about, if it's 10%, 20%, but here's my commitment, Senator. My commitment to you is to tell that story. I will come out and visit every state's and understand what's important to them and tell that story not only to the president, but also work with members of Congress. And if you all see fit, I will fully and fairly enforce the minimum wage laws that you all see fit and work together. I know, again,
it needs to be a conversation between us here.
It's
I mean,
important.
it's not just on us. You're going to be somebody who's supposed to be fighting for the American worker. Is 50% of someone's salary too high in terms of what goes towards housing?
Well, again, depending on what the salary is, people can determine that. I mean, if I had to take a guess, you're wanting me to say yes or no. It's hard to guess on what people want to spend on their housing, but I do want to help the American worker. I want them to make enough money. I want them to give them the opportunities, and I want to work with Congress on this issue because it is important. This is a sensitive issue. We hear about it all the time. You know that, and I know that.
As I said, the top issue. And I'll say that, when it comes to the lowest median rents that we see in this country right now, it's around $850, $900 a month, which is at around $10,000 a month. Yeah. And these are in some of the states where, again, the minimum wage is $15,000 a year, so talking about 2/3 of their salaries. When it comes to paid leave, I mean, I know a colleague of mine was going to raise this, we were able to move forward on government employees. I wanted to just get a sense, do you believe that all American workers are entitled to paid leave?
Again, we don't have a federal paid leave.
Should we?
Well, that again, I know as a Department
I'm just trying to get a sense of your vision. I get it. You're not a lawmaker anymore, but I'm just trying to get a sense of what you're going to be fighting for. What's your vision for the American worker?
Well, my vision for the American worker is to achieve the American dream.
I understand that, but is part of the American dream paid leave for all workers?
Again, I cannot commit to you today that I would say 100% paid leave across the board is something that should be taken up by the federal government. Independent of states, state of Oregon, again, they choose to do that respective of their states. I want people to have the opportunities to keep more of their hard-earned dollars. I know the president, again, is in line with the America First agenda to have those freedoms, to keep those hard-earned dollars that they earn, and we want to make the most prosperous opportunities available for them to earn the most based on what they are skilled to do, and offer them the development and the skills that they can to earn that opportunity. I want this more than anything.
Yeah, and look, I want it too, and that's why, if confirmed, I want to work with you on this.
Absolutely.
But I'll just tell you, when I talk to workers back in New Jersey, they say it feels like death from a thousand cuts right now. There's housing, there's healthcare, there's so many other things. They're working 2 to 3 jobs just to be able to get by. They're not asking for the moon. They're just asking to be able to live a life of dignity and decency. And I hope that we can at least be able to stand up and say that that's what we're going to fight for. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator.
Kim. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Coach.
Let's beat a dead horse here. Right to work state, Alabama. My constituents at home want to know that, are you going to try to change our status as right to work?
I respect the fact that you are from a right-to-work state, and I respect the fact that you can continue to be a right-to-work state.
Thank you. Back when we had the PRO Act, I offered an amendment that would require authorization from employees in order for any kind of dues, fees, or assessments to be used towards a political campaign by the union bosses. It failed. Are you for that? Are you for, how would you handle that? Dues going from a union, paid in a political contribution from employees that are not asked, can we use your money?
So you're saying they pay their dues, it's used for a political contribution without their knowledge?
Right.
Yeah, well, again, that's not something that I think they should be aware of where their dues are going.
Yeah, okay. Just asking.
Yeah.
You voted for the PRO Act. I was just asking.
I didn't, Senator, if I could correct the record, I did not vote for the PRO Act. I put my name on this. We did not have a vote on the PRO Act, so I just wanted to correct the record on that.
All right. We had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. My constituents want to know, you worked in Planned Parenthood years and years ago. You pro-life or pro-choice?
I am supportive of the president's agenda. I have a 100% pro-life voting record in Congress, and I will continue to support the America First agenda, which we know includes life.
Good answer. All right. Talk to me about legal immigration. In my state, we have the most engineers in the country, in the state of Alabama, because of NASA and defense contractors and all those things. We're running short on a lot of engineers, high-tech people that are well-trained in our country. For some reason, we're running short because big tech is growing. Where do you stand on legal immigration? Your thoughts?
Well, I'm supportive of legal immigration only. I mean, I don't see another way around it. But you're talking about, are you referring to the H-1 visa program?
Anything to do with high tech, anything to do with engineers,
Yeah.
that, you know, eventually we're going to have to allow more people to come, but not to tear down the structure of young men and women having a chance to make a better living because they spent 4 or 5 years at a university and have to pay their bills.
No, I appreciate that so much that you brought this up. You know, certainly we never want to replace the American worker. We want to make sure that we're investing in the American worker and they have the skills needed for the high-tech industry, as we see moving forward through a lot of our respective states. On the visitor's visa, on the H-1B, there's been conversation about in the immediacy. I've heard that from many of the senators. It's about today. What happens today and tomorrow? I commit to you to working, again, with testing the market. That's the Department of Labor's remit, is to test the market and seeing where we need the guest worker program. Once we've exhausted all other programs and making sure that we're out there, then work with the Department of Homeland and certainly the Department of State on if we have to administer more. But that's going to be certainly, Congress will determine it, and then I'll work with those interagencies as well. And I would love to work with your office on that specifically.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not going to put you under a gun on this question. You probably don't know a lot about it. A lot of people in this room know a lot about it. NIL, name, image, and likeness. Mm-hmm. It is a disaster. And we're going to have to do something in your tenure to help young men and women understand, the situation that we're in, because we're going to start losing Title IX. We got a young man that just signed an $8 million contract, and he's 20 years old. And it's out of control. So the next time you come, hopefully we can have a hearing on what we call name, image, and likeness. I'm all for kids making money, but it is workforce. It needs to be changed. It needs to be regulated to a point where, all men and women, young men and women, can have a chance to make money. So just to bring that to light, but that will be under your purview in the very near future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And next would be Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to thank you, Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, for the opportunity to meet with you ahead of the hearing. I really felt we had a robust conversation about the workforce and how we move forward as a country, and the fact that working people deserve respect, protection, and fair treatment. I want to start by just acknowledging, I know you are following the reports, the over 10,000 federal employees, civil servants who have been fired in recent weeks, including staff at the FAA, the NIH, HHS, the Department of Education, and more. And to me, beyond the harmful impacts that those individuals are feeling and their families are experiencing, it is having ramifications across the country. Everything from our plane safety to biomedical research to measles outbreaks that I just heard on the news earlier today, to the avian flu. All of this, while the cost of eggs are not going down, people are feeling the impact. I'm also concerned, I shared with you, I had the opportunity to serve in Delaware as Secretary of Labor, and so labor is so important to me, but also State Personnel Director. And just from a workforce planning perspective, a lot of this doesn't even make sense. To get rid of some employees that are protecting our national security, our nuclear safety, all of these things, and our health just doesn't make sense. And then there's going to be the ripple effects of where do these folks who are now unemployed get the resources they need to live and survive? How do they deal with the trauma? There will be ripple impacts. And what you said is you want to help the American worker. And I hope that you will consider these individuals as also American workers. My questions, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we discussed in terms of the future of work, which has been one of my top priorities in preparing folks for the jobs of today, but also the jobs of tomorrow. And in Delaware, we have a robust biotech ecosystem involving workforce-focused partners like the Delaware Bioscience Association and the National Institute for Innovation and Manufacturing Biopharmaceuticals at the University of Delaware, also known as NIMBLE. We also have with our students the Delaware Pathways and vocational technical high schools in Delaware and 2 labor unions. So far, we know we need more workers to grow our economy. Do you have a plan to prepare workers for careers in emerging industries like biotech and AI?
Thank you, Senator. I really did appreciate our meeting as well. I know you have the knowledge from a labor department in Delaware and that you ran that, and I hope we work together and you will share with me some of the tips and tricks of the trade, because I don't need to reinvent the wheel in a lot of places. I just need to make sure that we're respecting and honoring your story as well, and for Delawareans.
Delawareans.
That's right.
Good.
But this is important, specific to the skill. And I think what we talked about is even more so than high school. We're talking about junior high. And understanding how important that is for the workforce, that we have to get these young people in early and understanding what they care about, and that we have that workforce. So under the Department of Labor, it is going to be my responsibility to make sure we're investing in that workforce development. I was proud, and I was brought up earlier, to serve on the Ed and Workforce for reauthorizing WIOA. That's, again, a bipartisan. It didn't happen. It didn't go through. And I hope, with all respect and talking to the president, if it aligns, that this is something that if Congress takes it back up, that I can work with you all, not only technically, but to enforcing that and really investing in the workforce specific to high tech, because we know we're going to need those jobs. And so this is an important issue, I would think, to everybody sitting up here, that they're a part of the workforce and respective in every state.
I know in our conversation, we talked about making sure that labor as well as industry are present at the table when we make these big policy decisions, when we do legislation. One of the things that I will be focusing on and introducing legislation on is an accelerator, the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the Department of Labor. ARPA-L is similar to what we've done for health with ARPA-H, with defense for DARPA, which gave us groundbreaking technologies like the internet and Siri. And so hope to work with you on these as well. And again, let's make sure that we focus on all workers. That includes those folks that are being fired, laid off, and in a lot of trauma. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the committee. I enjoyed our conversation. We had a chance to talk a little bit about the Alaska workforce. I'm looking at an article that just came out, and it cites to the Alaska State Department of Labor and Workforce Development, looking at labor statistics, or workforce statistics back in 23. We don't have 24's numbers yet. But right now, non-resident workers in our state make up 23.5% of the workforce. That's a lot. It means we get folks that come to us from other states. When you have 82% of your communities that are not connected by road, you can't move as a worker from one village to another village unless you're willing to pay several $100s for each leg of your airplane ticket to get you to another community for work. So we rely on out-of-state workers. In the oil and gas industry, 37.4% of the workers were non-residents. In the mining industry, non-residents accounted for 41.6%. In the seafood processing sector, which is significant, it's one of our largest employment and economic drivers in the state, producing more than $5 billion in economic activity. So this is big for us. But what is even bigger is in 2023, 82.8% of the workers were non-resident. We process our seafood in small coastal communities that, if they have a population at all, it's maybe 500 people that are there. You cannot run a seafood processing industry when you don't have the workers. And so back to the comment that was made earlier about H-2Bs, this is significant for us. Senator Collins asked about your commitment to issue supplemental visas in a timely manner, but also to the maximum extent allowable. You do have that discretion. You've indicated that you're going to work to that. I'm going to ask you to look specifically to the seafood processing sector. Of all the sectors that are out there, and my friend from Virginia knows full well, seafood is more truly seasonal than so many other sectors. But right now, we're competing, if you will, for these H-2Bs with other sectors like landscapers. Last I checked, you can do landscaping 365 days practically in most parts of the country. The seafood sector in Alaska, you're looking at an industry during the summer, at least when it comes to salmon, where it is literally an 8 to 10 week season. We are the poster child for seasonal workers. I need to know that you will not only support the H-2B visa program, but commit to working with me on legislation to exempt seafood processors from the H-2B visa caps. This is something that we've been trying to work for years. Basically, we've been stalled out by big labor that is so concerned that we're not offering these jobs to people across the country. You can't get an H-2B visa until you have demonstrated that all the efforts that you have made to seek U.S. workers and that none are coming to you. So we had the conversation in my office. It's important to state it here publicly how significant it is, and I need your assurance that you're going to work with us and work with your partners within Homeland Security as well on this critical issue for us.
Yes, ma'am. I will commit to working with you specifically on this issue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. A lot of conversation about apprenticeships, so I'm not going to revisit that, although I did just come from a meeting with the head of the Alaska Military Youth Academy, who was talking about the benefits of going from that exceptional program to hand in glove with the Alaska Works training program, so that these young people can see the benefits right then, right there. Maybe I want to be a welder, maybe I want to be a carpenter, but you take them hand in hand. Last thing I'm going to raise is something in a conversation just yesterday with the head of the building trades. We're talking about childcare. We're talking about childcare because we can talk about a workforce, but if people can't get to the workforce because they can't afford childcare, so I would hope that you're going to prioritize families in the workplace and support incentives for on-site childcare.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Since his inauguration, President Trump has waged war on public servants, especially federal workers and their unions. The president violated union contracts, including by firing tens of thousands of federal workers, used his fork-in-the-road proposal to strong-arm federal workers into resigning and waving away their legal rights and illegally attempting to nullify union contracts ratified in December of 2024 and January of 2025. As Secretary of Labor, will you abide by the terms of collective bargaining agreements between the Department of Labor and federal agency staff unions?
Thank you, Senator. It was nice to visit with you. I know it's been a few weeks since we had that meeting, so I appreciate you being here today. Certainly, the Department of Labor is outside of the NLRB, where collective bargaining is committed and happening, independent of the Department of Labor. So I will, work with your office in determining exactly what it is that you're specifically asking, but outside of the Department of Labor is to protect the American worker. And then, of course, as we overlap, because the Department of Labor expands a little bit more than collective bargaining and unfair labor practices under the NLRB.
But will you advise President Trump and Elon Musk that they must reverse all decisions that violated the contracts that were negotiated between the unions and their agency employer?
Well, certainly my role, if confirmed, is to advise the president on a full picture, and I will be candid on what that full picture looks like and then work with the White House. And if it aligns with the president's America First agenda, I will be that advisor to him, yes.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, collective bargaining is not part of his agenda, and that's where the Department of Labor historically has intervened to make sure that those protections are put in place. In 2023, during a House Committee on Education and Workforce markup, you said you can't have a strong union without the presence of the NLRB. On January 27th, President Trump illegally fired NLRB board member Gwen Wilcox in direct violation of the National Labor Relations Act. The NLRB now lacks a quorum and cannot enforce laws meant to protect working people from union busting and other illegal behavior by companies. And last night, President Trump signed an executive order stating the previously independent NLRB must now report to him. And the overall effect of this full-on assault is that President Trump has left workers unprotected with no way to exercise their labor rights. So as Secretary of Labor, you will be the president's top advisor on labor issues. If President Trump called you today and asked if he should reinstate Gwen Wilcox, how would you advise him?
Well, that's a hypothetical, as you know, and I have not been confirmed. But I respect the president's executive authority to run the executive office as he sees fit. He is the one who was elected president by the American people, and he's honoring the promise he made to the American people. If confirmed, I will work on behalf of the president, but I will present him a clear and candid picture with the facts, and we will consult then together. But it is important from the Department of Labor that I give him that full picture.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, according to President Trump, the NLRB is no longer an independent agency. And by signing that executive order to abolish the independence of the NLRB, it puts a lot of pressure on you to make sure that there is a protection for the independence and capacity of that agency. And I appreciate your record of engaging with unions, but workers are under threat at their workplace and in their homes. Greedy corporate executives chip away at their rights, lay them off, got their retirement, all while driving up prices. And the president is letting the richest man on the planet cut public school funding, threatening our children's education and jobs of the largest sector of union workers in the country. He lined his inauguration with billionaires collectively worth over $1 trillion. And since his inauguration, union workers in Massachusetts have already lost many, many jobs. And some of my Republican colleagues are eyeing cuts to programs that help people get food, housing, and health care. So if you're confirmed, and I'm assuming that you will be, I commit to working in support of all workers, and I hope you will work with me to stand up to President Trump when he takes actions that harm American workers. I think it's very important that the Department of Labor and you be the voice for those workers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Markey, and now Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, welcome. It's great to see you here. I enjoyed our conversation. It's been, gosh, now a month or more ago, but it's great to see you here. You've taken questions, obviously, from both sides, and I know you've taken a little heat from both sides. You've handled it beautifully. Let me just get a few things straight. For my Republican colleagues, let me just clarify. You are President Trump's choice to lead the Department of Labor. Have I got that right?
Yes, you have.
And you support the president's policies and will implement his agenda. Have I got that right?
Yes.
And to my Democrat colleagues, you very proudly sponsored many pieces of pro-labor legislation in your time in the United States House of Representatives. You have a long record of working with labor, of working with business to try to advance a pro-worker agenda. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Which is probably why the president chose you for this role, if I'm speculating. Is that fair? I think your
seems
record
reasonable.
is really outstanding. Let me ask you about one issue that hasn't gotten a whole lot of airtime today, but I think is so important. That's the significance of immigration when it comes to the American worker. I've got a chart here that I want to show you. This is the Department of Labor's own data on jobs following the pandemic and in the last administration, in the Biden administration. If you look here in the red, those are foreign-born workers. If you look at the blue, those are American-born workers. And as you can see, the data that you can see it, the graphic itself tells the story. American-born workers, no change in employment, just a return to the norm in the Biden administration. Foreign-born workers, that's where all the jobs go. What's it mean? According to the Department of Labor's own statistics, during the Biden administration, virtually all of the job gains, which were pretty meager, I have to say, but even that, virtually all of them went to foreign-born workers. Now, we know, again, from the Biden administration's own statistics, that about 11 million encounters with illegal immigrants were recorded at the border. During 1 month alone, the Biden administration allowed 370,000 illegal immigrants to cross the border. Many of these people got work permits and started working, competing with American workers and legal residents, many of them union members. And of course, illegal immigrants, not union members, companies don't pay them the same wages. They don't offer them the same protections. Speak to the danger of out-of-control illegal immigration when it comes to wages and benefits for American workers.
Thank you, Senator. Very important issue, and one that I know that the President has been very public about, protecting the American worker, and understand that we don't want to displace American workers. I understand some of the senators in the guest visa program on the immediacy of certain industries. But as a whole, we want to make sure that we're always investing in the American worker first, that we want to be one of the strongest economies in the union and in the world. So we can be on a level to compete with our, maybe our foreign adversaries when we're talking about China. But what's important to the President and important to me and how we align is making sure that we're putting the American worker first and that they have the opportunities to earn and be at those jobs as they see fit, and the Department of Labor to support them in that investment in that those industries.
Is it fair to say that a tough border policy that cracks down on illegal immigration, that stops the flow of mass illegal immigration across our border, stops the work permits being given to illegal immigrants, this is pro-worker. This helps American workers maintain their wages and maintain their jobs. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Let me ask you about some of the children who came across the border, were trafficked across the border in the last administration. 520,000 of them, to be precise, unaccompanied children trafficked across the border. Hundreds of thousands of them lost and now being exploited by companies like Tyson's Food, for example. Let me just give you an example of bad corporate behavior. Tyson's Food has closed down 2 major plants in my state, the state of Missouri, just in the last year and a half. They have canceled contracts with farmers. They have put thousands of workers in my state out of business, and yet we know from the investigations done by the New York Times and others that they have huge numbers of illegal child labor in their supply chains. In their factories, they are putting children who are trafficked here to work. So they're firing American workers, but they are exploiting child workers. Will you go after companies like Tyson's and anyone else who would violate our labor laws and exploit children while they are firing American workers?
Yes, it's an important remit under the Department of Labor, as you know, to protect and not exploit all workers, but certainly child labor should not be accepted by anybody in America. And the Department of Labor has the enforcement capability to double down if they knowingly are breaking the law and exploiting children in their factories.
I think we've got to make the penalties even tougher. Senator Booker and I have bipartisan legislation to do that. And again, it is pro-worker to say we're going to protect Americans who are working legally, and we're not going to allow children to be exploited in this country, or people trafficked into this country to be exploited for the purpose of profits by these mega corporations.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Senator Also Brooks.
Thank you. Good morning, Mrs. Chavez-DeRemer. And I want to, first of all, congratulate you and your family on your nomination. And to begin by saying Maryland, the workers that we're talking about today, Maryland has the highest per capita share of federal workers in the country. So the people that we're talking about are my constituents, by and large, and they are reeling from this administration's mass firings. Now, when we had our conversation last week, and I know that it was reinforced today, you assured me that you would abide by the law, that even if encouraged to break the law, you said that you commit to following the law. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Now, do you believe that a collective bargaining agreement is enforceable under the law?
Yes.
And if I can ask you, are you aware of the statute which recognizes the right of federal employees to engage in collective bargaining?
I don't know the statute number, so.
It's Title VII of the Civil Service Reform Act, but what I can tell you is that statute, are you aware of that statute or any statute that limits the binding nature of a collective bargaining agreement based on when it was signed?
I'm not an attorney, as you know, and so I would like to.
But you would
explore this a
be
little bit
in
more.
charge
Yes.
of enforcing the law. So if it is the law
Yes.
that there is no statute that limits the binding nature of a collective bargaining agreement, then you would enforce that collective bargaining agreement.
I will fully and fairly enforce the law if.
Now, I want to tell you that President Trump has canceled what he has called as lame duck collective bargaining agreements. And I want to ask you whether what statute there is that you believe would give the president the authority to cancel or void approved union contracts certified during a lame duck.
I'm not familiar, and I cannot weigh in on any specific statute that you're asking me about.
But again, if it is the case, and it is, that there is no statute that allows you to set aside a collective bargaining agreement, there is no time limit, would you enforce that collective bargaining agreement pursuant to the law?
Again, Senator, being not familiar specifically, I would certainly want to, discuss this with the solicitors at the Department of Labor if confirmed, just to make sure that I am on the same page without committing to exactly.
Well, no, but
what
once
you're
it's
referring to.
confirmed for you that it's the law, you have committed that you will enforce the law.
I'm committed to always fully and fairly enforce the law, and I will work with the solicitors of the Department of Labor to make sure before I weigh in specifically on this specific that you're talking about.
Okay, let me ask you another question. Now, President Trump made some, I would call it troubling and shameful comments after the devastating fatal plane crash that occurred here in Washington, D.C. I'm sure you're aware of that plane crash.
Yes, ma'am.
And he blamed, at the time, while the bodies were still in the water, many of them were children, he took that moment to blame the incident on Federal Aviation Administration hiring people with intellectual and mental health disabilities. Again, while the recovery efforts were going, do you agree with the president's comments?
Senator, I cannot comment on what the president says or does not say. I support the president in this agenda that he is moving forward with.
No.
So
The question is not his agenda. Do you agree that with the comment that hiring people with intellectual and mental health disabilities was the reason do you agree with the comment that was the cause?
I have not had a conversation with the president on this, and I cannot weigh in and speak to that any further.
Okay, I want to make you aware that the same hiring language that appeared on the Federal Aviation Administration's website under President Biden are also there during President Trump's first administration as well. So nothing has changed in terms of the hiring practices. But should workers with disabilities be allowed to work
Absolutely.
at FAA? Okay. Now, in an email that was sent out across the government through OPM, it classified, it used language that, quote, said that their goal was to move from their lower productivity jobs in the public sector to higher productivity jobs in the private sector. Do you agree that public sector jobs are low productivity
Again,
no, this is not hypothetical.
Unless we determine what those are, it's hard for me to, if just putting it all in one size fits all, it's hard for me to comment on that.
No. It's a yes or no. Do you believe that public sector jobs are, quote, low productivity jobs? Is that your opinion?
On its face, no. No.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
All right,
you.
I yield.
Thank you, Senator. Also Brooks, our senator from Kansas, who's a little humbler this week than he was 2 weeks ago.
Chairman, I hadn't even thought about that issue for about 3 minutes. But I am serving lunch today to the junior senator from Pennsylvania.
And Senator Blunt Richardson notices that you're wearing Philadelphia Eagle colors. So
guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. All right. Well, welcome, Congresswoman. Thank you for being here today. I'm so grateful for President Trump nominating you.
Thank you.
I think when he did this, it was certainly a shout out to the hardworking men and women across this country. Based upon your resume, the work you've done, that you certainly have been a person committed to, again, those hardworking men and women across the country, union or non-union workers. Those are people that President Trump supports, and we want them to be successful. We want you to be successful, and I think you're going to be a great representative at the table. Represent him as we're going forward. I want to talk about workplace development for a second. Though unemployment is relatively low, supposedly, our participation rate isn't as good. And I think there's an opportunity there to get people back in the workforce. And if they don't have the skills, the education to do that, then let's help them out. I see there's so many great opportunities, our community colleges, our technical colleges, the unions, apprenticeships, all those pieces are out there. What can we do, what can you do to help support them and help them be successful?
Thank you, Senator Marshall, and I'm sorry that the chairman is being so mean to you in the first few minutes of you being here. But again, it was great meeting with you because we had that conversation about workforce development and workforce investment in our communities and how it can differ oftentimes in a metro area versus a rural area and all of the above. And how you mentioned to me your family in the local community colleges. I took Clackamas Community College right outside in Clackamas County, right from Happy Valley, and how important that was for the community as a whole. And from the Department of Labor, I couldn't, again, be more prideful that I had served on education and workforce on the WIOA reauthorization. And while it didn't make it through, I hope Congress, if the president sees that this is important, that Congress will take this back up for the reinvestment into our young people so that they can be skilled and reskilled in our respective states. I can't wait to come out and visit, and I think I've mentioned this to a couple senators, coming out to all 50 states would be amazing to really learn how the labor laws are affecting your respective states and the investment in the workforce. So I commit to you that I will work hard for the Department of Labor and the agencies within the Department of Labor to make sure that our young people are ready to go in the workforce. And I also know we talked about the average age of a community college entrance is 27 years old. Sometimes people are looking to upskill or get another certificate so they can stay in their communities where they're raising their families, and that's their investment. So I look forward to making this wholeheartedly a pillar of the Department of Labor is workforce investment and development.
More flexibility in the Pell Grants would be a step forward.
And we worked on that also in workforce and sponsored that bill. We did it for pilots, young pilots, but certainly that was important.
What about how can you better work with state agencies?
Well, oftentimes the Department of Labor and the federal-state partnership is key and sometimes forgotten. I think one of the areas that we can look together is unemployment insurance, was talked about over the last several years, and how we can be a better federal partner, give them the tools that they need, the state partners, in order to develop their workforces and make sure that they have people who are in the workforce who want to stay in the workforce and not pick up and leave. And again, invite people back. So many people have left the workforce, even the search of a job, and we want to make sure that those people are coming back from full force.
I want to take a moment and talk about the franchise model again. And I heard the chairman's opening remarks or questions kind of touched on this, but I want to go back there. In my mind, what the franchise model has done is helped many people achieve their American dream of owning their own business and being successful too.
That's right.
And I think it's been a great opportunity, especially for women, for minorities, for veterans as well. And we have to work on this balance. I want the unions to be successful. I want the franchises to be successful as well. How do we achieve that balance? Any thoughts on where's the win-win opportunity when it comes to that issue?
Well, a lot of times the reference is to the gig economy and understanding the franchise model as well. And I support that the efforts of, the franchise model as it does allow the flexibility for business owners to determine, do they want to be in business for themselves? Do they want to, work for somebody else? But I think the only change that can be talked about today that will work in all of these is everybody has to have that voice and understanding at the table. One of the reasons the president nominated me, and that it's kind of been mentioned, but it's not always that we're going to agree on both sides, but we're going to be understood, that they will have a voice. That's the difference this time, that I want everybody at that table to have that voice and what is valuable to them and their membership or them and their employees or a business owner when they're struggling. Compliance is important, the education of compliance. And then also, that we can protect all American workers. There's a continuum from the first day that we have our first job all the way through retirement. wherever a worker is or a retiree is on that continuum, they should be respected for the hard work that they've put in. I can tell you, bringing everybody at the table is going to do just that and reinforce the things that we care about in our respective states. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Chavez-DeRemer. I enjoyed our conversation last week and appreciate your enthusiasm. I thought I'd start with just a quick answer, a quick question, that if you track the shrinking of the middle class, which we've seen in this country over about the last 60 years, I think it's safe to say, it almost exactly tracks the reductions in unionized labor in terms of as a percentage of the workforce. They track almost perfectly. Do you agree that we want to get more workers in unions as a method to expand the middle class? Is that a worthy goal?
Well, I think the goal is the option. If people choose to organize, they should have a free and fair right to organize. And if they choose not to, they should also have that right.
But don't we want to have more? Isn't the country better off with more working people getting paid better wages? And really, the only way that generally happens is through union representation.
Well, again, supportive of both sides of the table is going to be important. If an employee chooses that they want to be in a union, in order they have the right to do so. And the same if they choose not to. It was just mentioned on the other side about, what does it look like for the franchise model or the independent contractor model. So I think the flexibility and the conversation is what's key here. And is there room for both? I believe there is. The president certainly believes there is, because this is the new direction of where oftentimes we've had the extremes arguing. If we keep the American worker first and foremost, we're going to come to the center of that table and I think develop exactly what you're talking about, keeping more of their hard-earned dollars.
I appreciate that. And again, the ultimate goal, we want to expand the middle class. I appreciate your small business background as a small business person myself in a past life. I think that will be invaluable. We met last week with some of the leadership from the Cherry Creek School District in South Metro Denver, one of many that has innovative apprenticeship systems they put in place, and they're training teachers, HVAC technicians, engineers, aerospace manufacturers, go down the list, healthcare workers of various sorts. And this is just one of many programs we've got in Colorado. Now, the president's proposed funding freezes are going to prevent us from keeping many of these programs running in our state, and I think taking valuable opportunities away from the kids. How can you, as secretary, assuming you get approved, how can you protect these programs against attempts to unilaterally, and I think in some cases unlawfully, claw back the federal funding from these programs?
Well, I think the key here is going to be presenting to the president, again, I mentioned visiting and understanding exactly what's happening in Colorado and all the respective states, and presenting to the president as his advisor what's happening on the ground. That's what he wants to see, a candid, clear, concise picture, so that as we move forward in the America First agenda, that we're going to be supporting the American worker. That is first and foremost in his agenda. We're aligned in that. That's the conversation that we had, is that he wants to support the American worker. And so I will present to him the clear facts from all of the respective states.
Okay. Back to youth apprenticeships, which, as you know, my last 6 years as governor, that's what I spent a lot of time on, and I look at it as one of the great gaps that 65 to 70% of our kids aren't going to get a 4-year degree, and we have done a piss-poor job of giving them the tools to acquire the skills necessary to have, the American dream. Is there ways that we can look at to expand apprenticeship programs, youth apprenticeship programs? So I'm not just talking about 18 and over. I'm talking about 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kids who could want to work in an accounting firm or an advanced manufacturing or a hospital, whatever. How can you see us expanding that through your tenure at the Department of Education?
Well, I think we can certainly agree that, and you heard the conversation about, speaking to even our youngest, our junior high, our middle school kids, all the way up into high school. But I would like to work with your office and, as if confirmed, get into the Department of Labor, really expand and explore what can be done. But if I could work with your office specifically on this and get to know it a little bit better, I would like to have that conversation with you.
No, I will take that and we'll follow up on that. We'll get you out to Colorado. A lot of the records, on February 5th, DOJ went to the Department of Labor and demanded that certain federal employees' information be released. And I think there was a lot of retirement account, private information. We haven't seen I haven't seen any disclosure of how those records are going to be used. And I think, what are the reassurances that the American people have that those are still safely secure?
Well, I haven't seen them either because I have not been confirmed, as you all know. I have not been read in onto what is happening with DOJ in the Department of Labor. But if confirmed, that'll be the first thing I do is make sure that I'm briefed on it and made aware of everything that's happening. So I don't have that answer for you because I don't know what's been happening either.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
This concludes our hearing. You did very well, and thank you for that.
Thank
to
you.
your
Thank you.
To your parents and husband and children, I know y'all are
Yes,
incredibly proud.
This is my,
So let me just
my
say
mom
that.
and dad,
Yeah.
my daughter, my parents.
For any senator who wishes to ask additional questions, questions for the record will be due tomorrow at 5 p.m. We now conclude the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.